All right, good morning, everybody. This is the fourth episode of Pick and Pop. May have a bit of a longer episode today just because I intend on talking about a bit more. Of course, I'm going to do the season preview of the American League East. This will be my first of six season previews for all the divisions. Basically, what I'm going to try to do at least is go through all the divisions, go through each team, give like a rough prediction of what I think their 162 game record will be, kind of go through the shape of the rotation, looking at how their lineup stacks up, potential injuries. And then, of course, it is in general hard to predict because a lot of teams, especially the competing ones, make changes and, make deals down the stretch, especially, you have some teams that make several moves by the July deadline, and that changes the scope of the season a lot of the times for a lot of these teams. And of course, baseball is a long enough season to where, it can be late May and you still don't really know how things are going to turn out in the grand scheme of things. You can have a team it's well into first place at the end of May, and then they might end up finishing below 500. That's just kind of how things work in the MLB. So it's really tough to gain a measure on teams. But of course, there are usually a few elite teams that you can safely at least predict that are going to be in the mix every year. Now, before I talk about my season preview and go through all the teams in the American League East, last night, just do a quick look at the NBA action that went on last night. There were just 6 games. Not a whole lot of exciting ones due to March Madness going on. There were some exciting games there. How about Florida State, Loyola Chicago, both heading to the Elite Eight, as is Kansas State, who knocked out Kentucky. Michigan is joining them, and then 4 more games tonight, which should be really exciting. I don't really know enough about college basketball to talk about it in depth, but it's always fun to watch March Madness, one of the best times of year. Incredibly entertaining every year, and I think this year especially. I'm a student at the University of Missouri, so this year is exciting to see my team finally make it to the tournament. Of course, it didn't work out when we were there, but very exciting in comparison to how the Mizzou basketball team have been playing the last 3 seasons. And that's the cool thing about March Madness is that, you get in the tournament, anything's possible, as you see with Loyola Chicago. And of course, finally this year, having a 16 seed beat a 1, which is just incredible. So a lot of really cool things. But other than that, speaking of cool things and incredible things, if you were in Charlotte, North Carolina last night, you saw a little bit of both. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. The Hornets beat the Grizzlies 140-79, a 61-point defeat. That is the 6th largest defeat in NBA history. The Hornets outscored the Grizzlies 37-14 in the first quarter, 38-28 in the second, 37-15 in the third, and 28-22 in the fourth. So at halftime, they were leading 112-57. Or not at halftime, after 3 quarters. So that is pretty unbelievable. And what was most unbelievable about this game was the performance of one Kemba Walker. And it's a good segue since we were talking about March Madness, one of those players that has had an iconic moment in March basketball, not quite in the tournament, even though he ended up leading his team to the championship when he was at Connecticut. But last night, this guy had 46 points in 3 quarters, and that's not just it. It was in 27 minutes and 56 seconds of game time. He shot 13 for 18 from the field, 10 for 14 from downtown, and was a perfect 10 of 10 at the line for 46 points, a plus 47. Jeremy Lamb was a plus 51 in 26 minutes of game time. Walker also had 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal to lead to the Hornets' largest victory in franchise history. And of course, Memphis Grizzlies likely don't mind that, as they're looking to get that first overall pick, one of 2 teams in the NBA below the 20-win mark, Phoenix being the other one. They have identical records at 19-53. The Sixers beat the Magic by 20, 118-98. The events last night also led the Cleveland Cavaliers to clinch a playoff berth. They will be heading back to the playoffs for the 4th straight season. Of course, all of those with LeBron James on the team. The Rockets beat the Pistons in overtime, 196. James Harden had arguably his worst game of the year, but still good enough to get the job done. He was 4 for 20 from the field in 40 minutes and 23 seconds, 13 for 18 at the line, 0 for 8 from downtown, had 21 points to go with 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. So still not by any means a bad game. The Pelicans edged out the Lakers 128 to 125. Anthony Davis, 33 points to lead to that victory in New Orleans, currently in the 4th spot in the Western Conference, really looking to be in good position to make it back to the playoffs for the first time since 2015. The Jazz and the Mavericks, Utah picking up another win. They beat Dallas 119 to 112. Big performances from Ricky Rubio and Donovan Mitchell in that one. And the Kings beat the Hawks 105 to 90, and that is a segue to what I'm going to briefly talk about here. And it's not entirely related to basketball, but of course, it was an issue that had a big role in what happened outside of Sacramento leading up to yesterday's game. So Kings beat the Hawks 105 to 90 in a very inconsequential NBA game, but only a few hundred fans were in the building to see this because there was a protest outside of the Golden One Center, a locked arms protest blocking the entrance of the arena after a video was released of Sacramento police shooting and killing an unarmed black man, Stephon Clark, and shooting him 20 times in this process. He had no gun, he had no weapon, he merely just had a white cell phone. So if this is something that you keep up with, you likely know that this happens far too often, and that these issues are very real. They're very real for the minority communities in this country, and police brutality is a very real issue. And I don't think that there's any way that you can get around that at this point. I think it's always been an issue, but I think especially within the last 4 to 5 years, it's become a lot more salient of an issue. People are really starting to see it now. It's starting to become very apparent. And it gets a lot of people angry, it gets a lot of people opinionated. But I think the most important thing of this issue is that it gets the people that are targeted afraid. And people should not be afraid of the police department. And sometimes the saying, if you do nothing wrong, nothing bad will happen. Well, that clearly doesn't apply. The background to the story was that Sacramento police had had gotten a tip that there was a break-in in that same neighborhood, and they were looking around. Stephon Clark could have been the suspect, but they did not know if he was a suspect or not. They just saw him moving around backyard to backyard in the neighborhood. He ended up in his grandmother's backyard, which was where he was killed. And yeah, the officer shot him 20 times, went to the ground essentially instantly. And it was also at nighttime. There was no real way for him to see what was in his hand, and instantly said gun when it was a white iPhone. So that is what sparked the protest outside of this game last night, which led up to a couple hours before the game. The game was delayed by 15 minutes leading into that. And that was it seemed to be a bit of a problem for the large amount of fans that were waiting outside. So after around 10 to 15 minutes from the game's scheduled start time, they were all instructed to go home, that the Kings would issue an email about a refund. But the Kings did issue a statement that, they really do feel for the family that was affected by this and the issue that it poses for the community. And I think that's a really good statement. And that while that's unfortunate, none of us want to go to a game and not be able to get in because of a protest, I do think that the underlying point that I'm trying to make by discussing this, as it has become more and more relevant in sports, and I really hate the phrase stick to sports, because these issues are part of our everyday lives. And while sports are an escape for a lot of people from, the mundane life that we all seem to live, it is involving real people. There are real people involved. And when it is such a big part of our culture and our lives, there's going to be social and political issues intertwined with it. And those have to be acknowledged and addressed, because the people that are affected by them, that are also athletes and are also people that, are involved in this industry, they have real lives too. And that's something that always has to be addressed. But the underlying point that I'm trying to make is that when people do protest, it is to bring that issue to attention. It is not to make things convenient for whoever is witnessing the protest. And while, there are a lot of extreme ways we've seen to peacefully protest, whether it be blocking highways or seeing something like what happened last night. At the end of the day, it is just that it is peaceful. They're not hurting anybody. And it is something, it's a really powerful way. And it forces you to think about what they are protesting about. And while, it may not have been the people that were locking arms, blocking the entrance that were, so severely affected personally by that issue, but it's something that affects that community, affects a lot of communities in this country. And something that they are, they're bringing to the attention. I do feel like if you asked a lot of the players on the court, they would certainly feel the same way, as I think a lot of professional athletes are starting to in this time that, it's becoming a lot more acceptable and looked up upon if you are going to be somebody that, uses that platform to make a difference. And I think that's really powerful. It's really important. I think the most important thing is to recognize not just the humanity of these athletes, but the humanity of everybody and what goes into these issues that see their protests. So while, it's certainly frustrating, I probably would have been frustrated if I was going to go to an NBA game and couldn't get in because of a protest. But at the end of the day, they are begging for change. And while it may not be us that can directly contribute to that, we can make ourselves educated about these issues, and we could do everything we can to assist these communities and these people that are affected by it, and to make it more and more of an issue to legislators and to the people that are empowered to be able to make that change happen. Because when human lives are lost, that is when it becomes a very serious issue. And I'm glad that what happened last night took place. I think it's important and it's powerful for something like that to provoke this issue into the minds of many that may not have been thinking about it already. So I do think that's important. I know I talked about that for a little bit now, but I do think that that's an important issue and something that needs to be discussed as it relates to sports and the experience of watching sports. Now, with all of that being said, I will talk about baseball now. As I'm taking our sip of iced coffee. So the American League East will be a very, very exciting division this year. It's the first division that I'm taking a look at. And of course, this has been a division that, at least throughout my lifetime, I'm about to turn 22, the American League East has pretty much always been the most competitive division in baseball up until the last couple of years, really. I mean, this is a division that, headlined by the Red Sox and Yankees, was routinely churning out World Series contenders year after year. And then even in more recent years, when we saw Tampa Bay go to the World Series 10 years ago, Toronto and Baltimore starting to find more of that success in recent years by getting to the playoffs. This is a division that is exciting most of the time, and I think it's going to be particularly exciting this year between these five teams. So basically what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go fifth to first, explain what I think of each team. These predictions are going to be rough. They're probably not going to be right, but at the same time, that's what's fun about it. We're only 6 days away from opening day. It's getting very exciting, and it's something that's always a lot of fun to look at. So for the fifth place team in the American League East in this upcoming season, I believe that you are going to see that in the Tampa Bay Rays, who actually were competing for a playoff spot throughout most of last season. They kind of fell apart later on in the second half. And this is a team that certainly has a lot of talent, especially on the defensive end. There's a lot of really good defenders that they have on this team, and there's certainly a little bit of offense. Of course, the addition that they had of Adeiny Hechavarria in the middle of last season, that's somebody that is a good defender at the shortstop position and can give you a lot of good contact hitting. You like the addition of CJ Cron. Carlos Gomez, of course, if he can stay healthy, is a difference maker. And then you have arguably the best defender in baseball in Kevin Kiermaier. And he's just one of those people that when you watch him, nothing is out of his range in center field. He's absolutely incredible. He's so quick. He's so athletic, and he's becoming a better hitter as time goes on. And he's really exciting to watch. But I do think that this Tampa Bay Rays team just kind of lost a lot of what they had last year as far as what was able to keep them in games. Now, if you look at their pitching staff, they still certainly have a good amount of weapons. You can't look past Chris Archer, who is, as long as he's healthy, pretty much a guarantee to be top 5 in the league in strikeouts. He's going to eat up a lot of innings for you. Matt Andriese has shown that he can pitch and start games at a pretty competitive level, and they have some good additions to their bullpen as well. And, Blake Snell probably going to fit in as that third starter on the team. But then you look at their bullpen, they added Sergio Romo, a veteran presence. You don't really know what you're going to get out of him. And the same can kind of be said for the addition of Dan Jennings, who, had his first year at the Rays last year. You don't exactly know the type of contribution you're going to get from there. And then Nathan Eovaldi, who has dealt with a lot of injuries the past couple of years. So there's a lot of uncertainty on that pitching staff. The one certainty to me outside Chris Archer's strikeouts is Alex Colome, who I think is one of the most underrated and overlooked players in baseball. I mean, this is somebody that is a dynamic closer, somebody that really is able to fit into that position extremely well. He has a great pitch repertoire for it. And this is a guy that's just plain fun to watch at the end of games. And while last year he wasn't as stellar as he was the year before, still had 47 saves, but a 3.24 ERA, struggled a bit more with control. Excuse me. But, I mean, this is still somebody where if you look at what he's able to do in the type, from having a devastating fastball, a really good breaking ball. And you look back at 2016 when he was the all-star on a Rays team that really was not good at all. He had a 1.91 ERA. So you're hoping to see that kind of contribution. The thing is, he's also 29. He's older than a lot of people think he is. So that may, he may be a bit more injury prone than he has been in years past, but you certainly don't hope to see that if you're the Tampa Bay Rays. So this is a team that I think can be a lot better than they look on paper if all their guys stay healthy, but they've just dealt with a lot of injury issues. And once again, they have a lot of talent. Denard Span is a guy in the outfield that is typically able to stay healthy, and he's somebody that can hit 280 to 300 on a routine basis. But there's just a lot of wild cards. I mean, you look at that infield, Brad Miller has been pretty inconsistent the past couple of years. You don't exactly know what you're going to get out of Matt Duffy, who has shown flashes of excellence in the big leagues, but hasn't been able to put that on any scale of consistency. And you don't really know what you're going to get out of CJ Cron playing in a different system for the first time. So Wilson Ramos, if he stays healthy, is probably going to be the backbone of that offense. And when the catcher's the backbone of the offense in this day, it probably means that's a weaker lineup. So, I do like this Rays team. I like the potential, but there's just too many wild cards on, too many things that have to go right for this team in order for them to be competitive. So I do have them at 5th in the American League East. I think you're going to see them finish probably at 68 and 94 is what I'm going to go with. I don't think they'll be so awful, but I think in a really tough division, they're going to have a tough time stringing together wins and finding ways to, win series against these other teams in that division. I mean, it's just going to be pretty difficult. In fourth place, I should say, in the American League East, I'm going to have the Toronto Blue Jays in that spot. And this was a team, I mean, you go back to 2015, they were the scariest team in the MLB heading into the playoffs just because of what they had offensively. They had one of the most prolific and tough lineups that we have seen in recent years, especially since, the recent pitchers era. And now we're finally back into a sluggers era again. But this is a team that certainly has a lot of wild cards. I love their lineup. I mean, if you look at what they're able to offer you offensively, once again, I mean, if most of these guys stay healthy, they're going to be tough to beat. They're going to hit a lot of home runs. I mean, Russell Martin can still give you around 20 home runs. Aledmys Diaz, who was an all-star in 2016, of course, last year really struggled, dealt with some injuries. This is somebody that is really looking to have a career renaissance, and I've watched him play live several times. I really do have faith in this guy. I mean, this is a guy that is a dynamic baseball player. Can cover all parts of the strike zone at the batter's box. Of course, he really, really still has to work on the defensive side, but that's a benefit of him playing in the AL. Of course, while you still have Kendrys Morales as a DH, if you need to, you can slide him into that spot. But the amount of raw talent that he has with the bat is truly incredible. And if last year wasn't too mentally tough on him, he can really recover. And on a team that has a lot of lineup protection around him, especially on the power end, I mean, you just look at that infield and the power that it gives you between Justin Smoak, and then you have Josh Donaldson, and then you have Troy Tulowitzki, who is, of course, a wild card with staying healthy. And then you have uh, Jan Hervis Solarte, who was added, and that's a guy that, can give you 20 homers potentially and has shown to be an effective hitter at the big league level and can slide in and play first base for you. Devin Travis, a really good defender. I mean, there is a lot of talent on this team. And in the outfield, I mean, you get more power. They added Randal Grichuk, who has, I mean, you want to talk about raw power and one of the most short, compact swings. I mean, as a Cubs fan, it really, really hurt seeing him jack out homers all the time. But this is a guy that can straight up stroke. And I mean, if you're putting him in this division where home runs are known to be extremely prevalent, every team can hit him. I mean, don't be surprised if Randal Grichuk can hit 40, maybe even 50 homers if he stays healthy. I mean, this is really somebody that can pull the ball unlike any other right-handed hitter with that short stroke. And it just has a lot of raw power. He's going to strike out a lot, but if he is hitting for power and if he's able to line up a lot of those, he is going to be a big factor for this Blue Jays team. And then you have Curtis Granderson, who, whether he's hitting well or not, is going to get on base for you. And in a team like this, that really makes a difference when you have a lot of lineup protection. You have another one of the best defenders in baseball in Kevin Pillar. You have Steve Pearce, who can hit home runs. And then you have Kendrys Morales as a DH. So the lineup is not the problem, but there are a lot of question marks with this team's rotation. I mean, you look at their ace and who do they want to go with? Well, I mean, Roberto Osuna is probably their most consistent pitcher on the staff right now, and he's their closer. He's also 22 years old. So, you're looking at what you're trying to get out of this rotation. There's a lot of confidence in Marcus Stroman. Of course, Aaron Sanchez is incredibly talented and shown that he can handle the load by switching to the rotation. And then you can fill out a rotation. It's just that you don't know what you're getting out of it. So if you want to set up a 5 that goes Marcus Stroman, Aaron Sanchez, Marco Estrada, J Happ, and Jaime Garcia, that's not a horrible rotation. But at the same time, for all you know, all 5 of those guys can have ERAs north of 4, especially in this division. You don't know if Aaron Sanchez is going to be able to match his velocity with the added amount of power that is in this division now. Marcus Stroman is the best pitcher of that staff and is likely going to be relied on to pitch in all the big games, but he's still somebody that is a bit of a question mark and has dealt with injuries in his career. And then you have Marco Estrada, J Happ, and Jaime Garcia, who are all getting older. Jaime Garcia is very inconsistent, somebody that can shut a very good lineup down on one day as long as his sinker's working. And then if not, you can really have some problems if you're Jaime Garcia. And then Marco Estrada, of course, has the problems of giving up the long ball, and J Happ, who has shown flashes of brilliance the past couple of years, but you still don't entirely know what you're going to get out of him. You don't know if you're going to be able to replicate what he was able to do, last year. And then you have a rotation that is just kind of full of question marks. And of course, it's a good team. If things go well, they can make the playoffs, but I just don't really see that happening with this team, especially just because that rotation is not going to be able to handle what Boston and New York offer. So for my record for the Toronto Blue Jays, I think they'll be a good amount better than Tampa Bay, but I think it's reasonable to expect that they match what they did last year. I think I'm going to have them at 76 and 86 once again. I think they're just going to have a lot of trouble playing within the division, and the fact that the American League in general has just gotten better. I mean, when you're playing out of division games against Houston and the Angels now, it's going to be difficult. In third place, I have the Baltimore Orioles, who have a really good lineup and made an addition from within the division to their rotation. I think that's really going to help them. Of course, a big problem with them is that Zach Britton is on the 60-day disabled list. And, they're hoping to get him back by the end of May. But with, an Achilles injury like this, you have to expect that he may be sidelined a bit longer. So you just have to hope to keep things together when he's there. But this is a team that has perhaps just as much firepower in the lineup and just a little bit more pitching to get them by, at least a little bit more consistent pitching, and certainly a better bullpen. If you're looking at what Baltimore brings to you with their lineup, Tim Beckham, the former first overall pick, really had a strong year last year, and I think he's going to continue to grow as a player. They're going to give you certainly a lot of power. Chris Davis and Mark Trumbo alone can give you seemingly limitless power. You're hoping for Manny Machado to be able to hit close to 300, and he's somebody that can be an MVP candidate and single-handedly in that regard play a big role in getting a team to the playoffs. Jonathan Schoop, somebody that had a breakout season last year. You still have Adam Jones, who's the meter of consistency in that outfield. And then, you have Mark Trumbo as a DH. Now, within that rotation, you're relying on Dylan Bundy, you're relying on Chris Tillman and Kevin Gausman, and the addition of Alex Cobb is certainly very helpful, and along with Andrew Cashner. So I think that rotation gives you just a bit more certainty than Toronto's, in the sense that it's younger guys who are, still kind of getting adapted to the system. And I know Baltimore, you can never really bet on their pitching to bail them out in too many situations, but I really do think that, we've seen a lot of promise out of guys like Gausman and Bundy in the past couple of years. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they have really strong seasons. And then you look at Andrew Cashner, who has shown that he can put it together at the MLB level. He's certainly been a bit inconsistent. And Alex Cobb, who was outstanding in Tampa Bay when he was there and is familiar with this division. So I do think that Baltimore's rotation provides a bit more stability. Then in the bullpen, you have Darren O'Day, who you're hoping has a bounce back here, in Brad Brock, but there's still some question marks in the bullpen. But once you get Zach Britton back and hope that he's healthy, Baltimore will be in a better position to perhaps make a playoff run, but I don't quite think that will be the case. I have the Baltimore Orioles at an even 81-81 this year. I think they'll be really good. I think they'll stay in the playoff race for a while, but I just don't see this team capable of making that step into the playoffs. There's just not enough depth in that bullpen. And, their lineup, as powerful as it is, can go extremely dry and, strike out a whole lot. Do not be surprised if they lead the league in strikeouts. In second place in the American League East, I have the Boston Red Sox. I think this team will be a wild card team as well. They're good. They were good last year, and I think they are still very good this year. That rotation is still extremely tough to deal with. I mean, you really don't know what you're getting out of Rick Porcello. You hope that David Price offers a bit more consistency this year than he did last year. And of course, when the playoffs come, he hasn't really shown that yet, even though he had a really good performance out of the bullpen in the playoffs last year. And then, of course, you have Chris Sale, where if he's healthy, he's one of the best pitchers, if not maybe the best pitcher in baseball. So there's certainly a lot of positives in the Boston Red Sox, especially on the end of pitching. Now, they do have some injuries that they're dealing with heading into the year. They're hoping to get Drew Pomeranz back a little after the start of the season. And then, of course, Stephen Wright, they're hoping to get him back a little after the start of the season. And Eduardo Rodriguez is dealing with a knee injury, and he's the kind of guy that can fill in the rotation, can also go to the bullpen, and he's supposed to be out until the middle of April. And then you have Dustin Pedroia, who's going to be out till the end of May. So there are some injury issues that the Red Sox are dealing with right off the bat. But I do think at the same time, this team has a lot of depth, and if you look at their lineup, you can expect guys like Xander Bogaerts and Mookie Betts to have better seasons. And while Mookie Betts still had a great year last year, it was his on-base percentage that kind of made up for the fact that he was hitting .264. He was just getting on base a lot more. And I think you can expect to have a better season from Andrew Benintendi and be able to see him continue to grow. And I think adding JD Martinez, somebody that is a 40 home run hitter, adding him to the lineup makes a big difference. And Rafael Devers, who is going to continue to grow, and I really like what I saw out of him. And then you have Christian Vasquez and Blake Swihart. Like, these are all guys that are expected to get better. And I think that as long as most of them stay healthy, they're going to. I think they're in a perfect environment. I really do think that Alex Cora is going to be able to manage his team extremely well. He had a very high baseball IQ as a player, and I think he's somebody that moving in with this team and the system that he's familiar with, knowing how things work, I think the bullpen is just going to be the one part that the Red Sox are going to perhaps need to ramp up outside of having Craig Kimbrel as their closer. But I mean, this lineup and that rotation, they're going to be really tough to beat. And I would not be surprised if they won the division. I do think that they'll make the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up winning it all. I mean, if they make a few additions at the deadline, if everybody stays healthy, they can be a team that challenges essentially anybody. So I have the Red Sox in second place, getting one of the wild card spots, and I will have them finishing at 93-69. I think they'll be really good. And that's actually exactly what they finished last year as well. But I do not think that they will be better than what the New York Yankees offer this year. The New York Yankees are really something this season. The addition of Giancarlo Stanton just adds a whole nother layer of how are you going to beat this team? How are they not going to score 16 runs a game? And as a Cubs fan, I was really excited going into 2016 because I felt that that was the case with that team. And I mean, they were 103-58, like it kind of was. But this team and just the amount of sheer power that they bring to the board, I mean, Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton can hit 70 homers in a season in that ballpark. I mean, that can happen. I'm not saying it will, but like that is what they're capable of. They have some of the most insane raw power with bodies that are able to generate that so easily. I mean, with both of them, you're just seeing incredibly effortless swings on these balls that are going 490 feet. And in that ballpark, I mean, imagine if they were left-handed, they'd hit 100 homers. But still in that ballpark, I think that this is a team that's going to just be so hard to slow down. And I mean, you can expect both of them to strike out maybe even 200 times, but that's not going to make up for the fact that those aren't the only two guys in this lineup, because then you look at their infield and you have Greg Bird, who, if he's able to stay healthy and grow as a player, he can hit 20 homers. And then you have Brandon Drury, who, comes over from Arizona. He knows how to hit. Didi Gregorius, who is somebody that isn't as much of a power hitter, but is really good at getting a timely extra base hit and is a good defender. And then you have Gleyber Torres, who's probably going to see the MLB at some point this season. And then you make the addition of Neil Walker, a veteran presence who can still hit. Oh, and by the way, you have Gary Sanchez as your catcher, who can hit 40 homers. So that lineup is insane. And there's enough contact hitting kind of guys to offset the amount of power and strikeout risk that you're going to have. I mean, when you have Brett Gardner in the mix, when you have Didi Gregorius, Brandon Drury, those guys are helping to make up for the amount of strikeouts that you're probably going to see out of Judge and Stanton. And then you look at the rotation, which is where most of the question marks are, but it's not a bad rotation. I mean, you're hoping to get close to what you got out of Luis Severino. Then you have Sonny Gray, who was such a great trade just because you were getting him for more time than just a rental. And then you still have Masahiro Tanaka, so that's a really good top three. And then you have CC Sabathia, who you're unsure of what you're going to get, but it's still certainly something. And then you'll probably have Jordan Montgomery taken as that fifth starter. So then you go to their bullpen, it's just going to be extremely tough to get past. Adam Warren was great with the Yankees last year. And then you look at David Robertson, and then you look at Tommy Kahnle. Oh, and then, of course, Adelin Betances and Aroldis Chapman. So those are the difficulties that you deal with there, is that, we don't know if Aroldis Chapman is ever going to be the Aroldis Chapman of the Cincinnati Reds and the Aroldis Chapman that put the team on his back in 2016 to win a World Series as he's approaching the age of 30. But I think at the same time, I mean, this is a guy that there's nobody like him, and you wouldn't want to have anybody else up there to close the game than Aroldis Chapman. And I don't think you'll find too many people that'll say anything different. So, I mean, the X factor here is that it's Aaron Boone having a team for the first time. I think he's going to be a good manager. I think he's somebody that is, like I was saying with Alex Cora, I mean, he's familiar with the system. He's familiar with this team, knows these players. And I think this team just naturally is going to be very good. I think they're hungry. I mean, falling a game short of the World Series last year when they were not supposed to be a playoff team, I mean, this team really does feel like at this point they are the best team in baseball, and I think they absolutely could be. I don't think that they're the best team in baseball on paper. I think that honor goes to Houston, the defending champions, who just got even better. But at the same time, this team is the best team in this division, and I think they're going to win this division. I have them finishing 98-64 on top of the American League East. And that's around all I have for you today. So that was the season preview for the AL East. I'll be taking a look at the American League Central on Sunday. I won't have a video tomorrow, though, but once I get back home for spring break on Sunday, I'll make sure to do an AL Central preview. And then one of those days next week, I'll probably do 2 videos and then get ready for the start of the season, which is 6 days away. And then, of course, the NBA playoffs starting relatively soon as well. That'll be extremely exciting, and I'm very excited for that. But that's all I have for you today for this episode of Pick and Pop. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you later.